Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going on a thrilling investigative journey into how filmmakers piece together the origin story of the biggest band in the world, Led Zeppelin. You see, this isn't just your standard story about a rock documentary. It's a masterclass in the intense, forensic detective work required to track down completely lost history for the film Becoming Led Zeppelin. Okay, let's dive into this.
Imagine, just for a second, trying to build a massive, feature-length cinematic story around a subject that actively avoided cameras. I mean, they literally hated being filmed. That was the huge obstacle directors Bernard MacMahon and Alison McGordy were staring down right from the start. To pull this off, they couldn't just act like traditional directors. They basically had to operate like historical detectives, trying to solve a 50-year-old cold case with almost no starting evidence. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the void they were facing. Just look at these numbers. We are talking about a band that sold a staggering 300 million records globally, right? Yet they had basically zero early television appearances. On top of that, music videos weren't exactly a standard marketing tool back in 1971. This massive, unprecedented global fame, contrasted with a complete and utter lack of early promotional material, perfectly sets the stakes for this whole investigation. So you're probably wondering, why was there so little footage in the first place? We'll take a look at this. Their famously intimidating manager, Peter Grant, literally destroyed the evidence of their early shows. I'm not kidding. If somebody showed up to a theater with a camera, Grant would personally rip out the film and have them thrown out. When the guy running your career is literally destroying the physical evidence of your existence, launching a 5-year independent search for surviving footage starts to feel, well, almost impossible. Part 1, The Missing Witness. Hunting for Bonham's voice. The late, great drummer John Bonham tragically passed away in 1980, and when the filmmakers started digging, they realized there were almost zero known professional interviews with him to use as a primary source. Without Bonham speaking for himself, the narrative of the band's origins was going to be totally unbalanced. So, they launched a massive global search. And they made an absolutely miraculous discovery down at the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia in Canberra. They unearthed a completely mislabeled tape from Sydney radio station 2SM that nobody, literally nobody, even knew existed. That mislabeled Australian tape became the absolute backbone of the script for Bonham. And to give that recovered voice a visual counterpart, they secured incredibly rare 10-year-old home movies of Bonham, playing his very first drum kit provided directly by his sister, Deborah Bonham. Part 2, Unearthing Hidden Attic Footage. Because with his voice recovered, they really needed the visual evidence to match. This is where the true, old-fashioned, shoe-leather detective work really kicked into high gear. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how literal this door-to-door hunt was. Alison McGordy talked about visiting these tiny, remote English villages where residents somehow had footage of Zeppelin at the 1969 Bath Festival just sitting there, hidden away in their attics. The filmmakers were hunting for absolute gold, and man, it paid off. They uncovered incredible things, like a totally unseen full performance of Dazed and Confused that gives us a perfect ringside seat to Jimmy Page's guitar pyrotechnics. To make sense of all these newly found fragments, the directors needed the surviving members to weigh in. So in August 2018, exactly 50 years after the band's first rehearsal, they conducted what we can basically call the interrogations. They interviewed Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones completely separately to make sure they got candid, unself-conscious answers. I mean, Jimmy Page even sat through a 7-hour exam-like interview. To trigger raw, real-time memories, the directors presented them with all the gathered evidence: unseen photos, flyers, old tickets. They were basically using this unearthed ephemera as a time machine to pull these notoriously quiet rock stars right back to 1968. Part 3, The Forensics Lab, Restoring Damaged Vintage Media. Because finding this stuff is only half the battle, saving it is the other. The technical measures required for these fragile pieces of history, once they were finally located, were just extreme. It was like walking into a chaotic crime scene of media formats. The archival footprint of this band was scattered across 35mm optical prints, 16mm magnetic audio, 2-inch quad video, and 1-inch tape, not to mention a whole bunch of conflicting international standards. Extracting usable audio and video from this total graveyard of obsolete and often heavily damaged technology required an intense, incredibly delicate forensic analysis. Let's break down one specific case file: rescuing a live performance of Communication Breakdown. Step 1, they locate a CCAM standard 2-inch quad videotape from a French TV broadcast. Step 2, they couldn't just pop this thing into a player. They had to transfer it using a highly specific, custom-made Studer A827 deck. And step 3, the audio preservationist had to extract the mono track specifically because it effectively matched a 16-track 2-inch master tape. It's incredibly, highly technical extraction work just to save the sound of a single song. And sometimes standard audio and video restoration just wasn't enough. Jimmy Page absolutely insisted on keeping a performance of Black Mountainside in the film because the sound was just so crucial to Led Zeppelin's identity, but the visual master tape was heavily damaged. So what did they do? They literally brought in Hollywood visual effects artist Melissa Quintus, who worked on the blockbuster Avatar, by the way. They brought her in to act as a digital surgeon, sweating over rescuing every single frame of that footage so it could finally be seen by the world. Part 4. Creating a psychedelic fantasia. Once all the evidence was finally collected and restored, it was time to build the case file. Editor Dan Gitlin had the monumental task of assembling these rescued fragments into a cohesive, thrilling cinematic experience. Alison McGordy summarized this monumental task perfectly. She said piecing this together was like writing War and Peace but cutting out all of the words from newspapers. That perfectly underscores the microscopic scale of the surviving evidence they were dealing with and just how incredibly painstaking the editing process really was. Let's move to and see how this builds, because having no outside narrator and incredibly sparse footage meant they had to rely on Golden Age Hollywood tactics to bridge the gaps. They drew inspiration from Singin' in the Rain and old Frank Capra films. They filmed authentic period tickets, newspapers, and memorabilia physically dropping onto the screen and layered multiple visual exposures right over the raw live performances. By physically constructing the montage this way, they perfectly captured the frenetic whirlwind pace of the band's very first year on the road. All of these restored fragments, the dropped tickets, the layered newspaper clippings, all of it climaxes into a true psychedelic fantasia. By blending the raw restored footage with that vibrant ephemera and their legendary music, the documentary tells the story completely visually. It perfectly matches the dynamic, explosive energy of Led Zeppelin themselves, completely removing the need for some outside narrator to sit there and explain what you're seeing. The evidence, now beautifully restored, speaks entirely for itself. So the crucial point is that this film proves that history, even for the biggest, most intensely documented bands in the world, isn't completely written yet. It just requires the right detectives to get out there and find it. It really makes you wonder, looking at the massive success of this 5-year search, what other pieces of lost musical history are currently sitting completely mislabeled in a vault somewhere, or hidden away in some tiny English attic just waiting to be unearthed. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope it really sparked your curiosity to learn more.